Why did I move here? Was it the favour system or that magic that you see everywhere around Kourend? People getting their combat dreams started by fighting sand crabs, stealing relics so they don't click the same RD Knight for 10,000 hours. You could be the good guy for once. An honest, hard-working guy, farming some weird-ass fruits or serving people at a mess kitchen. Whatever your RuneScape dreams could be, you could find it right here. A place filled with history, demons, and political discourse. Unlike many kingdoms that started off as small villages that over time grew and expanded, Kourend's history is a bit more blood-stained, being founded by refugees during the bloodiest time in all of Gielinnor's history. As I've spoken about in my other videos, the God Wars was by far the bloodiest event that has ever occurred on Gielinor. Gods battling and their armies clashing to form battlefields of blood. Although it wasn't only refugees that had fled to a different continent, it's very important to note that there was a powerful demon who had defected from Zamorak's army present on Kourend, who had also used an artifact to summon his own demon army, before being sealed away within the catacombs of Kourend. There were those who wanted to be far, far away from the chaos and death that was encroaching all around them, and so, when they packed their bags, they fled in droves across the sea and settled on a landmass called Zeah. In this fledgling kingdom, there were 3 houses that ruled over the lands: Arceus, Piscarilius, and Lovacane. The other 2 houses that we know, Hasidius and Shazian, were founded during the 4th Age. It did take a few hundred years, but after a relative peace amongst the houses, King Raider I united the 5 independent cities into the Kingdom of Great Kourend. And this truly is the extent of all the knowledge we have of the history of early Kourend. King Raider's rule could be described as being relatively peaceful, and the same could be said for his son, King Raider II. Everything changed though during the rule of King Raider III. A charismatic man named Ithram gathered the lords of the various houses to join his rebellion, convincing them one by one to turn against the king. There seem to be varying theories for the issues which eventually caused this rebellion, but an excerpt from Ithram and Raider hints that they were combating the evil they faced. We can only assume that Raider III wasn't a very good ruler, be that through oppression or mismanagement of the kingdom. What we do know for a fact is that when Ithram had gathered an army of 100 knights, the loyalist army let them through, fearing for their lives, and potentially even defecting themselves. Reading directly from Ithram and Raider, such force showed his might, so much that the king could do naught but turn his sword upon himself. This ended the line of Raider. This gap in power allowed for the formation of the Council of Elders, headed by the 5 house lords within the land of Zeah. They ruled for 50 years and battled a terrible famine that in a stroke of luck allowed Hasidius to garner half the land of each house for agriculture. Though it did solve the imminent threat of famine, Hasidius had grown to become the largest house of the kingdom. After 50 years of relative peace, the Royal Accord of Twill was signed, with all 5 lords writing the document that detailed how the transition of authority from the council to the royal lords would take place. This document would detail how every 10 years there would be a Grand Lord of Kourend, ensuring a peaceful exchange of power, and each house could be on the seat of power for an equal amount of time. During this period of time where power was being passed house to house, there came the long winter. Wintertod had come to the continent and showed no mercy for the land, let alone for those unfortunate enough to meet its wrath. Freezing the lands to the north in a perpetual winter, the lords quickly began work on not only trying to figure out how to defeat this beast, but also how to preserve the knowledge of the civilization. The Grand Library of Arceus would be constructed to house thousands of texts, and a master Lovacane smith named Din would begin work on his plan to defeat Wintertod. There were 18 casualties in making this plan work, but it was done. A prison, capable of housing such an abrasive elemental force, was constructed, with 4 braziers being placed where bruma roots would be burned to emit a magical heat that could keep the unnatural cold in check. And at the front of the prison, the Doors of Din, gigantic metal doors that seal the elemental menace inside. There were 130 years of this succession of power, 13 royal lords appointed, and being passed on to the next. That was until Lord Shazian III, who seized control of Great Kourend using the military under his command, and ended up crowning himself as king. He broke the royal accord of Twill and formed the State of Kourend, and the Shazian family ruled for many years. It took the son of King Shazian VI and Enya Hasidius being crowned as king to break the cycle, as he took the name of King Hasidius IV, changing the outlook of his family's name, and to distance himself from the treachery that his ancestor had committed to seize control of the kingdom. This lasted for roughly 90 years, until King Shazian VII took control of the kingdom and began a reign of tyranny that was never before seen. He had an ungodly obsession with the Dark Altar, spending a large amount of time in the Tower of Magic where he experimented on citizens to further his knowledge of the occult, to further solidify his power, spending many of the kingdom's resources looking to expand his territory, which included expeditions to the Kebos lowlands, where he had built a secret temple in the side of Mount Quidamortham, with a very unstable altar to try and mimic the Dark Altar, allowing its reach to be unnatural. It's due to these expeditions and construction of the Dark Altar that the experiments on the local fauna had begun, leading to the creation of the Lizardmen. Though I'm going to summarise the Age of Strife and Xeric here, I have made a video regarding Xeric himself and the chambers of his namesake, and that covers the Age of Strife nicely. Feel free to watch that video if you want to learn more. The Battle of the Concourse was a climatic coup d'etat carried out by several high-ranking warriors within King Shazian VII's circle, carrying out an assassination that would end his rule of tyranny. At least, that's what everyone thought. You see, his body was never recovered. Though it's claimed he was ambushed and killed mercilessly, there was no conclusive evidence bar the word of these soldiers. There was one thing that no one would expect though, a power more evil to rise and seize the reins of power. And the rumours began spreading about how the old king's followers had resurrected him before he took the name of Xeric. Lasting for roughly 100 years, the Age of Strife was truly the darkest period within Kourend's history. Oppression, tyranny, famine. Xeric quickly had the heads of all 5 cities executed, utilising the Dark Altar and his army of lizardmen to seize Kourend with an iron grip. Many citizens fled south and through the Kebos lowlands, heading straight into what would become known as the Kingdom of Varlamore, shutting themselves off from outsiders for their own safety. But in Kourend, at random, you could have your door knocked off its hinges and be dragged into the streets, where you'd eventually end up in the Tower of Magic, where Xeric conducted terrible experiments on those he deemed to be untrustworthy. Xeric made sure to utilise human warriors as a police force to spy and interrogate on their fellow citizens, and over time, a fire of revolution once again began to see its embers. There was a sergeant within Xeric's regime who attempted to resist his orders, but he was very quickly executed. Some attempted to break through Xeric's defences and storm the Tower of Magic, which failed, and saw all 200 perish at the hands of Xeric. It took 4 more decades of tyranny before things would change, and they changed quickly. It's said that on a quiet, sunny day, Ben was working his farm as he did every day. All was going well as it could anyway, during a tyrant's reign, until he witnessed an act so horrific he had to spring into action. A poor infant was brutally murdered by a lizardman guard who was near the field that Ben worked on, and this filled him with such a blood-filled rage, he grabbed his pitchfork and killed the guard in an instant. With other farmhands looking at him, some in fear, others in awe, he spoke words of revolution, and that's where Bern's revolt officially began. Revolution usually takes a very long time to take root before coming to fruition, but that is not the case for Bern. Bern's revolution caught on extremely quickly. Xeric was really not liked, so people did not need convincing, and overwhelming odds be damned, the citizens began to band together, and the militia soon outnumbered the Lizardman army that Xeric had gathered. Their might became so strong that some of Xeric's highest-ranking soldiers abandoned their posts and fled, and like a tsunami, the militia flooded the land and freed it from the iron grip that held on for 100 years. Over just 7 days, Xeric's forces were pushed as far as the Kebos lowlands, and soon, Xeric himself was exiled into the swamps and mountains south of those lands, causing the Age of Strife to officially be over. This successful revolution allowed for Kourend to begin healing, with Bern at the helm, taking up sovereignty over the Mad Mage, quickly putting in changes in the laws that were favourable for everyone. Truly, the sun could once again shine on the kingdom. The years going forward were relatively peaceful, with few issues. Arceus saw an event named the Ascent of Arceus play out, where the head of the city, Troban Arceus, was granted the secret of immortality, which he shared with the citizens of his city. Some accepted, others rejected, but those that accepted would be changed forever. No major events would happen for roughly 720 years. The odd political intrigue and deception for those seeking power, but overall, it was pretty peaceful. Many generations were born and peacefully died. That was until the late 4th Age, during the reign of King Agatha IV. A gluttonous and unruly man, it's widely believed that a terrible famine had plagued Kourend during his reign, due to his poor management of the kingdom and overall greed. As any unpopular monarch, he was usurped, being overthrown by the 5 leaders of the houses. While in the past this had led to peace, this time it was the precursor to an event in history titled the War of the 5 Houses. Yet another civil war within the kingdom. It lasted for roughly 20 years. But it is worth noting that even though it's titled the War of the 5 Houses, Arceus never fought in the war, instead reinforcing their defences and not shedding blood for what some perceived to be a petty squabble. Sneaky alliances were forged and easily broken, with casualties tallying high for the respective houses. Young men and women were drafted into the war, and a lot of damage was done to what was, despite the famine, a relatively stable kingdom. The ruling seats of power of Shazia and Forthos were destroyed, with Hasidius taking a particular battering during the war. Though it's unclear exactly how this war ended, we do know who took the seat of the monarchy once it came to its conclusion. King Kourend I, often referred to as King Kourend the Builder. He rebuilt Kourend to become stable once more, and is often fondly remembered, especially after such a bloody past. I'd love to tell you that the next 100 years were peaceful. It was anything but. The enchantments that contained all sorts of evil within the Kourend catacombs faltered, which led to the countless deaths of civilians as well as the re-emergence of Skitizo, and though eventually they were subdued and recontained, they remain an active threat, and a brilliant location to do your bursting tasks. If you recall back to the Age of Strife and how through that troubled time, the Kingdom of Varlamore was inadvertently founded by refugees fleeing south, they once again come back into the picture here. I do have a video on Varlamore, though it is a bit outdated and I'll probably remake it once we have the full Varlamore release. This is more or less where peace began to break down. Emperor Imafor of Varlamore invited the royal family of Kourend for a tour of the kingdom, and proceeded to poison them during a grand feast, which, as you can imagine, is a very big no-no. Naturally, this resulted in yet another bloody war, named the War of Betrayal, lasting for 6 years. until the climatic battle of the Proud Spire, where Immerthor was captured by freedom fighters and their leader, who turned out to be Immerthor's cousin, Mezpa Arkan. There was an attempt of re-establishing contact with Valamor from Kourend's End by way of them sending the Royal Accord of Twill to be shown in the Grand Museum, though it was lost at sea. And that was the last large-scale war that Kourend had faced. Though, our tale now moves to just 30 years ago from the current time that the game is set, to the reign of King Kourend IV. The fourth of his line, he was seen as a fair ruler, and though his life was filled with tragedy, he attempted to not only be a good king, but a good father. His wife had died giving birth to Rose, and though he was naturally heartbroken, he continued to rule, with a strong head, for now. The old king gave his only daughter his memoirs, not only as a family heirloom, but as a way of her to record the activities due to his ailing health. This is how we know that just shy of Rose's 11th birthday, King Kourend had bought a rose-shaped locket from an old dwarf tinker, which was meant to be a present for Rose, and an ornate flask for himself, and unfortunately, that flask was enchanted with dark magic, which only accelerated his ailing mental state. That was when, miraculously, a mage appeared who claimed to be an expert on curses, and came to the supposed rescue, and by rescue, I do mean he convinced a council member that the king's mental state was beyond saving, and that death was the best release for the poor king. With the death of the king at the hands of his closest advisors, they abolished the monarchy and declared themselves as de facto rulers, since Rose wasn't old enough to ascend to the throne. It wasn't long until Rose found out the truth behind her father's death, and in a panic, the council members sought out the same mage for a magical potion to stop her from telling the truth. He did give them a potion, though the effects were a little bit different. Instead of making Rose forget, it devastated her mind to such an extent that she went into a coma, which led the council to make up slanderous lies about Rose going insane, and how they'd make sure she was looked after, with the council cementing their rule over Kourend. 20 years had gone by of this rule, and things weren't looking good. Local correspondent Arthur Hasidius is on the scene. More crime, fewer homes, more illness, loss of jobs, the list goes on. Sounds like a modern day UK to me, more than a fictional kingdom, to be honest. It was during this period of time though where the trade routes to the mainland had officially opened up. And we, as dashing as we are, finally enter the picture. To start off with, you have no favour with any of the cities, so you need to start doing tasks. Never mind, ignore that. We're basically friendly with everyone now anyway. We've got some precursor quests before the meaty ones, such as X Marks the Spot, where we retrieve an ancient casket for a lovely chap named Vios. Client of Kourend is the natural continuation of that, where Vios asks us to get information on the current goings-on in Kourend for a client. How mysterious. Hopefully that client isn't anyone evil. It's Zarek, by the way. We then continue on with our journey throughout the kingdom and help numerous important figures and the 5 cities with their own problems, whilst discovering a larger plot at play. Not only is Zarek still at large and plotting something big, we discover the treachery of the Kourend Council. The fact that they had a hand in getting rid of the old king and his daughter before trying to pin the blame on one specific council member, Sophia Hughes. Though confronting her doesn't necessarily go well by way of her summoning a demon, who is the Judge of Yama, who quite literally incinerates her first before asking questions later. And then we defeat it, naturally. Getting our Sherlock hats on, we officially investigate the council and their wrongdoings, though things quickly go wrong, with Martin Holt, a major figure within Kourend and our main ally during this quest, being the target of an assassination attempt. Eventually, as the council keeps turning on each other, we do discover the location of Rose, where, not so funnily enough, It turns out that the council didn't actually look after her well-being. We go to a small shack at the base of Mount Kourend. We find Rose laying on a stone bed in a comatose state. We're told about these mysterious potions that supposedly keep Rose alive. More like poison, but we investigate the mysterious mage that was responsible for both her and her father's illnesses, and lo and behold, we find Xantha speaking to Xeric of all people, which isn't too surprising considering he is Xeric's right-hand man, in a way. Through a difficult fight, at least I struggled with it when I first done the quest a few years ago, he blasts us with powerful magic that nearly kills us. As he escapes, we find a note that explains that he was behind the first death in Arceus in a very long time, considering they're supposed to be immortal. Commander Fullor explains that Rose is, unfortunately, brain dead, and proceeds to mercy kill her, before we hatch a plan and speak to the leaders of all 5 houses to overthrow the council and restore the monarchy. Having spoken to the heads of each house, and also doing one small favour for each of them, we all come together and agree for Lord Hesidius to be crowned the new king. During the final cutscene of the quest, we see the few remaining council members be arrested, and a large banquet be held in honour of the new king. Even the Queen of Varlamore makes an appearance for the first time since the War of Betrayal, truly soothing some old wounds. Unfortunately, the merriment ends here. Through a heartfelt speech from the new king, we go to have a private conversation, and unfortunately, an assassin teleports in and one tick kills him, before we can equip our anti-PK gear. This leaves the throne for his son, Arthur Hesidius, to take up the crown. Kourend has a rich and vibrant history, full of blood, betrayal, and endless tithe farming for your farmer's outfit. Through the amount of monarchs and political scandals they've had, they truly have a fleshed out backstory that will stick around for years, and peace is never assured. As this commenter has brought to my attention, the newest and deadest king is killed by a Quality dagger, which may be to cause political division against Kourend and Varlamore. This does tie in with the ongoing storyline of Xeric, who is very far from dead, and is out there, somewhere, plotting and scheming. I'm sure we'll see him before long, potentially in a Grandmaster quest, but only time will tell. Thanks for watching, and as always, see you next time.